So there's a lot of camps in the strength training world. There's, of course, the volume camp. There's the high intensity camp. There's the absolute failure camp. There's the reps and reserve camp. So what really is the prime driver of muscle growth? They all work to some extent, but at the end of the day, the prime driver of muscle growth is mechanical tension. What is mechanical tension? Why is it, above all else, the true fundamental prime driver of muscle growth? Well, think about it in just general physics terms, right? You pull a rubber band taut, that's mechanical tension. You hook a load on a crane or scoop a load up with a forklift, that's mechanical tension. So your muscles do much the same thing, and the mechanoreceptors, little sensors in your muscle that detect the presence of and amount of mechanical tension, respond to the tension, and that's like the biggest signal that stimulates growth. Now you'll hear people talk about a lot of other factors also being responsible for muscular growth, like metabolic stress, muscular damage. These things are all true, but those are artifacts of the tension. For instance, if you do a ton of reps, you go to failure, then you do forced reps, and you just build up a ton of metabolites in your muscle, and you're super sore and just completely wasted, right? Well, that metabolic damage is as a result of the amount of time that you had that muscle under tension. There's nothing magic about failure or forced reps. It just is a way to over-index on mechanical tension in a specific way. The same thing can be said about progressive overload. Because of Henneman's size principle, motor units are recruited in an orderly fashion from weakest to strongest and most force producing. So what you're doing essentially with progressive overload is you are incrementally increasing the mechanical tension in a increasingly greater amount of muscle fibers. Again, just an artifact of mechanical tension. Volume, guys, same thing, even simpler. You are not lifting necessarily as heavier because you can't if you're going to do a lot of repetitions of it. However, what ends up happening is because you aren't lifting as heavy, you do more reps, you have more time under tension. So while the intensity, while the amount of mechanical tension in terms of magnitude is not as high, in terms of cumulative amount, it's much higher because you have a greater time under tension. And then lastly, frequency. Let's say like weightlifters, some power lifters, and occasionally how I like to train, like I did in the successive video of my pressing today. Some lifters like to do singles, doubles, triples. So technically, according to the textbook answer, below the rep range for hypertrophy. However, they do get a meaningful amount, not optimal, but a meaningful amount of hypertrophy stimulus from these lower rep range lifts by just doing a lot of sets. Like for instance, today in my pressing training, I did a warm-up set of 12 reps, and then I did like 2 ramp-up sets of 5, and then I did 10 sets of triples. Well, each individual set of triples doesn't have that much mechanical tension, but it has a decent amount of loading. And after 10 sets of triples, yeah, the mechanical tension was definitely recognized by my chest, shoulders, and triceps. There's a hypertrophy stimulus to be had there for sure. Now, which one is quote-unquote optimal? I mean, this is part of the reason why I hate that word, because number one, does that really matter at the end of the day? Is one meaningfully a better choice than the others? Well, you have to triage it. You have to look at your goals and the pros and cons of each approach, because at the end of the day, we're just trying to achieve mechanical tension. Starting with something like what I did today, you know, if you're going to do a bunch of doubles or triples or even 4s or 5s, because the load is heavier, You have to rest longer. It's just far more time consuming. So that's the big downside of that method of achieving mechanical tension. Furthermore, the heavier the load, the more fatigue inducing it's going to be per unit volume of effort. Higher volume training in of itself can also be very time consuming and fatiguing in a similar but kind of different way. Less neurological and more physiological, biochemically fatiguing. The same can be said for going past failure and using various intensification techniques. So it's all good, folks. It all works. Starting with the understanding that fundamentally we're just trying to figure out which brand of mechanical tension suits our training objectives and lifestyle the best. That is how we determine our route to hypertrophy. And it's about as far from an either-or thing as can be. You can press or squat super heavy for low reps and a bunch of sets. Then you could use intensification techniques for little muscles like calves and biceps. And then maybe your abs and your lats respond to just a crap ton of volume. So it's all right answers, folks. As long as you achieve a sufficient magnitude and total amount of mechanical tension, you recover and then do so again on a consistent basis, you will see results from your resistance training. Far more important than the means and the methods, folks, is understanding the principles behind the means and the methods, and then just showing up. Consistency is a superpower. Stay in the fight. Thanks for watching.